Welcome back. All right, so today's 32 team video, and the one thing that I think I'm trying to do with these 32 team videos is get used to alphabetizing all the teams and having Seattle in the middle. And yes, it's weird that St. Louis is SAINT, doesn't go alphabetically before San Jose because it's ST period Louis, but that's the way the NHL does it. So I'm trying to remember it as San Jose, Seattle, St. Louis. San Jose, Seattle, St. Louis. So, yeah, when I do these videos now, I'm using the same book for all these lists and trying to get that committed so that I can go through all 32 teams. Been doing it since I was a little kid, when it was 21 teams and I would have to memorize them all, and I've memorized them all in order, and here we are. So, I organized this by division. You've got the Pacific, you've got the Atlantic, the Metro, and the Central. So, there you go. Starting with the Pacific, we'll start with Seattle. So I'm looking at 32 players on 32 new teams. And not every team has been picking up players. So in some cases, there's kind of a this is by default situation, but every single team I found a player. All of them. And with Seattle, of course, it's kind of all of them. So who am I most interested in seeing play for Seattle and see how they do with the new team? It is going to be Philippe Grubauer. Grubauer, and again, I've mentioned this in videos recently too. Grubauer, everybody seemed to love him during the season in Colorado. Then Colorado gets knocked out of the playoffs, and all of a sudden there's all this, he doesn't belong in the Vezina. Why was he getting Vezina votes? Well, I watched him. I know why he got Vezina votes. But, I get it. And so we'll see how he does in Seattle and see whether or not his numbers were because he played in Colorado or are they because he's pretty good. I think both of those things are true, and I think they can be true. You can have a good goaltender behind a good defense. For Vancouver, now honorable mention to Jaro Halak. We'll see if he bounces back. But the one I'm most interested to see is Connor Garland. For this coming season, the addition of Connor Garland could be huge. Vancouver wants to be a playoff team. They've made that clear this year, and they're willing to have a cap issue beyond next season in order to make this season a successful one. So while Ekman Larson will be the one most people I would think are going to be watching, I'm really curious to see how Garland fits in. Going from one team to another, you just never know. You can get bad fits. Anaheim, former Canuck on this one. So not a lot of additions for Anaheim, especially of the high profile variety. So I'm looking at Brogan Rafferty, who was just kind of stuck in Vancouver, and there just didn't seem to be a lot of faith in him. And yet his numbers weren't bad. I think Brogan Rafferty could end up being a steal for Anaheim. He honestly could end up being better for them than he was for Vancouver if he gets more of an opportunity, and we'll see. Edmonton, I kind of had to go with of their new players. It has to be Zach Hyman, doesn't it? Zach Hyman, very hardworking player, and all the effort in the world is there. How much top-end talent is there? We know that he scored well for Toronto. Can he do it for Edmonton? Well, he's playing with McDavid and with Draisaitl. Of course he will. We said that last year about Cahoon, and it didn't work out. So you never know. Again, going from one team to another, and now he's got that big contract as well. Does that weigh on him? We'll see. For Calgary, I went with former Tampa Bay Lightning, Blake Coleman. Coleman signs a huge long-term contract himself. So much like Hyman, he's off to a new environment. He has to prove himself with that contract, and there will be more offensive pressure than I think he had either in New Jersey or in Tampa. He could just kind of, relax, be himself, play those third-line minutes in Tampa. In New Jersey, I don't think there was a lot of pressure on him there either. There will be some pressure on him in Calgary. We'll see how it goes. Vegas. For Vegas, I went with a goaltender here because Laurent Brossoit, and I mentioned this in the video where I talked about goalies that have switched teams and all that. Laurent Brossoit was good last year for Winnipeg. The year before, he wasn't as good. I was honestly kind of surprised he stayed that extra year in Winnipeg. So we'll see which backup goaltender Vegas gets. And then again, I've mentioned this before too, he has that pressure of he's taking over in a tandem that was populated by Marc-Andre Fleury last season and for the entire existence of the Vegas Golden Knights. So it'll be Brossoit and Leonard, and Brossoit is probably going to play a lot. How well does he play? LA, for the Kings, I went with, and I had a couple options here. I went with Philippe Denno. I could have gone with Arvidsson. Arvidsson, sure, I'll be interested to see if he bounces back. But Denno, again, big contracts put pressure on players. And Denno's a great face-off guy, great defensive forward who did not have a great year offensively. The defensive side of it, he is elite. He's fantastic. But the offensive side fell off a bit this past season. We'll see whether or not the goal scoring comes back in LA. It's possible. It's absolutely possible. And, yeah, curiosity for me. San Jose. San Jose, I'm going with goaltender here as well in Aiden Hill. And James Reimer, of course, as well. It'll be interesting to see. But this is Hill's first opportunity at being part of a tandem at the National Hockey League level without needing an injury to get there. In Arizona, it was always he was number 3 and injuries. And I could never figure out why Arizona never really gave him an opportunity. Now it looks like San Jose's going to by signing him to this 2-year deal. And it does have that show-me variety to the contract. We'll see how it goes. So going over to the Atlantic, starting with Buffalo. I don't know how many games Craig Anderson plays. It's possible Craig Anderson plays 5. It's possible Craig Anderson ends up being number 3. Maybe Luukkonen and Dell end up being 1 and 2. But, you know, Anderson today was talking about how weird it'll be playing against Ottawa. Yep. And I think Anderson showed for Washington this past season, it was very, very spotty in terms of how many games he played. He showed he can still play. So we'll see how it goes for Anderson this year and whether or not, you know, at the age of 40, can he have another good season? I on the fence on that one. Be curious to see. Boston, I had a couple options with Boston, but because of their current issue with center, the number 2 spot, could they try Eric Howla at that center? He's played center before. Could he end up being that number 2 center for Boston? Coyle slots into number 3. So, and that's just curiosity for me. And Howla, his offensive stats have been kind of unpredictable. If he hits the ground running in Boston, that could end up being a huge addition for Don Sweeney, especially in light of losing David Krejci. Detroit. For Detroit, honorable mention to Nedeljkovic. I think Nedeljkovic's goaltending is one of those things that could make Detroit kind of the ultimate wild card in this division. But Nick Leddy. This is also the video where you're reminded of guys who've changed teams, like Nick Leddy. And how will he perform in Detroit, where things aren't quite as top tier as they are for the New York Islanders. They're working on it, though, and that's why I'm saying not quite, because they're working on it, but there's still a lot of work left to do. How will Leddy hold up? So that'll be very fascinating to see. For Ottawa, going with a defenseman here as well. Addition from Vegas that I like. I like Nick Holden. I think he's a good depth defenseman. And Ottawa, much like Detroit, I think has built a, at the very least, interesting on paper defense. Where you go, you know what? This team, this could come together. We could look back a year from now and say, Pierre Dorion quietly put together a really good blue line. And Ottawa almost made it to the playoffs or made it in as a wild card because of the moves made by Pierre Dorion and the smart decisions along the way. So we'll see if this is the year. Florida, for Florida, it really has to be Sam Reinhart, doesn't it? So Sam Reinhart goes to a division rival, and Florida is where you go to score. Florida is where you go to get points and goals, and look at the points and goals put up by guys like Achari and Vetrano. Reinhart, it should be an immediate fit. It should be great. So we'll see, because again, there will be names on this board that we look back in a year and say, wow, that didn't work. In fact, I may take a picture of this board, post it on my Instagram, and then we can look back in a year and say, so yeah, that didn't work out, or that was even better than we thought, right? For Montreal, I went with the really oddly to me divisive Mike Hoffman. I think he takes more blame than necessary. Like, I think there's people out there that are complaining, oh, Hoffman's not good. Hoffman's a power play guy. Montreal, a team that has on and off struggled with their power play for years now, adding Hoffman should help boost those numbers. I like the addition of Hoffman, and I think for all the 5-on-5 criticism, I don't know. I think he can have a bounce back year. I think he can prove some people wrong. I think he's going to do his best to do so. Much like Toffoli in Montreal last year. Great numbers. I could see Hoffman having that kind of a run for them. Absolutely. Tampa. So, Tampa's a team that didn't really have any weakness last year, except backup goaltending. Curtis McElhinney did not give them the kind of backup goaltending where they could turn to their backup very often. Now, over a full schedule, we'll see if they turn to Brian Elliott more. But if Elliott gives them reliable backup goaltending, if they can get Vasilevsky nights off, especially since they've won back-to-back Stanley Cups and they're going to be beat up, they're going to be tired, it's a lot of mileage to put on your body. If Elliott can give Vasilevsky the needed rest during the season, I'll say like 25 games rest, where Vasilevsky's playing maybe 57 games instead of 65 or 70, that could be huge come playoff time. So Elliott is, to me, the one to watch of the new faces in Tampa. Toronto, going back to goaltending, I really think it's going to be a lot about how Mrazek does. Freddie Anderson had a disastrous year on his way out the door. So Freddie Anderson leaving Toronto doesn't get nearly as much attention as it would have after any of the other seasons he's had, where he's pretty good. There were some downbeats along the way, and definitely, you can talk about playoff success not being there. But Mrazek, there's a lot of pressure on him. I like Peter Mrazek. I think what happened after we went to Carolina was fantastic, but this year will show us whether or not that was because of Carolina and their development, or if it's Peter Mrazek. So him in Toronto, it should be interesting to see how that goes. So yeah, there were obviously a lot of players I could have chosen for these teams, and I went with Mrazek for Toronto. And as always, in the comment section below, let me know which player you're interested to see in new duds this fall and why. Pittsburgh. So we're going over now to the Metro, and Pittsburgh, going to be some pressure on Brock Mcginn. Brock Mcginn going to a division rival from Carolina to Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh kind of takes the spot of Brandon Tanev. And so, in light of losing Tanev and losing McCann, who I almost put up there for Seattle, but I didn't. McGinn, I like him, good player. We'll see how well he fits into Pittsburgh's attack, right? For the New York Islanders, Islanders have not added much of anything. They really haven't. So the closest I could come, and I said, no, we're not putting any question marks up on this list. It's all 32 or nothing. And Richard Panik on another team, right? Panik at this point, he's going through so many different teams. It's great because, of course, I use Panik pictures for my thumbnails for Panic Indexes. And the more jerseys he wears, the more teams he goes through, the more entertaining it makes it when I put together a Panic Index. So if Richard Panik plays for all 32 teams, that would benefit me greatly for putting together Panic Index videos. But yeah, does he play for the Islanders? Do they end up actually putting him in the lineup? We'll see. Carolina. There were other options for Carolina. Now, I know that Tony DeAngelo is going to get all of the attention because he's Tony DeAngelo. He is a lightning rod as a personality, as a hockey player, and just in general. But I'm curious to see if Ethan Bear has a bounce back after what was a down year for Edmonton. Before this past season, Ethan Bear looked like he could be an elite level defensive defenseman for Edmonton. And at least that was the expectation, that he could be that shutdown D-man for them. And then he had, by all accounts, an off-season. But now in Carolina, we'll see if he bounces back. He's not going to do what Dougie Hamilton did. I think Carolina's defense is going to be quite different in their attack this year without Dougie Hamilton. I don't think anybody's expecting DeAngelo to make up for Hamilton's points. But I think it'll be, defense by committee, which usually works out pretty well. Washington. Washington hasn't added a lot either. So they have a depth defense here. I don't know. So I went with Matt Erwin, who played about half the games last year. Didn't play a ton in the NHL the season before as well. We'll see if he ends up number 7 in this team's organization. Gets some top 6 minutes with an injury, how well he fills in. And Erwin as well, I believe, is collecting a number of different organizations along the way. Again, the Capitals haven't really added players. Their key thing was Ovechkin. Got to keep Ovechkin, right? New York Rangers. Rangers, this one's pretty easy. A couple years ago, Barclay Goudreau seen as a decent bottom six guy for San Jose. Now, cup rings. All of a sudden, he makes a ton of money for the New York Rangers, and that does put some pressure on as well. So, you got two guys here who leave the Tampa Bay Lightning, cash in on those cup rings, and I guarantee you, if they'd stayed in San Jose and New Jersey, I don't think they make the amount of money that they're making right now with Calgary and Rangers respectively, and both of them are going to have to show that this investment was a wise one. So for Goudreau, there's a little more pressure on him than there was in Tampa. New Jersey. So for the Devils, honorable mention to Thomas Tatar. Honorable mention as well to Jonathan Bernier. Love what the Devils have done so far. But for me with the Devils, it has to be. And again, we're looking at guys going to division rivals. And so going from Carolina to New Jersey, one team that wears red and black to another, Dougie Hamilton. Hamilton's making a lot of money. And with the amount of money he's making, the expectation is he's going to be one of the better defensemen in the league. And he has that capability, but it's a new environment. And again, you could never tell before these seasons get going. For instance, one of the honorable mentions I had, almost any team here, there are players who've had poor seasons, and we're wondering whether or not they're going to have good seasons. And it can go the other way. Guys, a great year in one team, for one team, goes to another, and it just doesn't work. Philadelphia. I almost mentioned a player and realized I haven't actually got to that team yet. So I stopped myself before I spoiled it for myself. So for Philadelphia, I have to give honorable mention to Ristolainen from Buffalo. There's been great debate about how good he is. Yandel, debate about how good he is as well and whether or not he's going to solve Philadelphia's problems. I had to go with Ryan Ellis. Leaving Nashville, just don't know. We'll see how he does. I like Ryan Ellis a lot, though. I think of the three defensemen that Philadelphia has added, I like Ellis the most. I think that's a really solid addition. Ristolainen can be, sure, absolutely. And we'll see how it goes for them. Of course, Yandel, who's looking for the all-time record for games played without missing any, that Iron Man streak. And we'll see how things go for him in Philly. Columbus. For Columbus, I went with a defenseman on this one. Now, Jacob Voracek's going to get all the attention. But Adam Boqvist is an excellent young defenseman that they added in the Seth Jones trade. And I really think that Boqvist has the potential to be a top four defenseman in his NHL career. He's still 20 years of age? He's young. So I still think that top four potential is there. I like Jake Bean as well. Jake Bean will be interested to watch. But Boqvist is the one I'll really keep an eye on when I'm watching Carolina games. So now we get over to the Central Division. We start off with Chicago. And I'm going to say honorable mention to Marc-Andre Fleury. We are going to find out whether his numbers were that good because he's in Vegas, or whether or not, we're looking at a goaltender that's been in decline and Vegas kept things going. Maybe it's just it was a great setup with Vegas, but we'll find out. However, he's not my pick here. In Chicago, so Seth Jones, that $9.5 million a year extension means he's going to be the guy that people are watching and seeing whether or not that contract looks bad immediately. And there are people who will argue right now that it's not a great contract or it's not a good contract. I will say that for me, I believe the jury's out right now, but we will find out very soon whether or not Chicago fans will love or loathe that contract. We'll see how it goes. St. Louis. For new St. Louis Blues, I had a couple options. And I'm going with Pavel Buchnevich. Buchnevich had really good numbers with the Rangers. Clearly, the Rangers weren't nearly as sold on his numbers as many fans are as the Blues were, and so they made the trade to try to toughen themselves up a little bit. Maybe they saw Buchnevich as being redundant with other forwards they had, but he will be fascinating to watch in St. Louis because if he scores 30, and if the Rangers struggle, there will certainly be a lot of looking back at this trade and saying, what were they thinking? But again, we'll see. Nashville, young player for them. I honestly think quietly the Cody Glass trade could end up being genius. And as much like for Vegas, people are going to want to watch Nolan Patrick and see how he bounces back from a down year, right? Maybe even Brett Howden. But again, for me, it's Bressois. But Cody Glass in Nashville, I think it's going to be a fascinating change of scenery for him. I like Cody Glass. I do. I think that he's still got a lot of potential. I'm honestly surprised Vegas parted ways with him. But maybe in Nashville we'll see why. Maybe it doesn't work out. But he'll have his chance. Colorado. For Colorado, another defenseman. It's been the summer for defensemen. It really has. And for Colorado, Ryan Murray. Why? Look at how they got knocked out of the playoffs by Vegas. A lot of it was an inexperienced blue line that was overwhelmed. And even Cale Makar at points in that series did not look great. So this is a team now that's going to be trying to prove that they can play that defensive game as well as the better teams in the West, like Vegas, right? So adding Ryan Murray, as long as he can stay healthy, can help them with that. He's a very solid defensive defenseman. And health is going to be the question mark. Minnesota. For Minnesota, you know what? They haven't added a lot either. So I went with Freddie Goudreau. Freddie Goudreau has shown at points during his career he can be a good spark plug. You get him in the lineup, he can have 3 or 4 really good games. For Minnesota, it's a low-key signing that there's no risk to, and Goudreau has shown, he showed last year in Pittsburgh, he was a useful forward for Pittsburgh. If he can play that utility role well in Minnesota, I kind of like the pickup for them. But again, Minnesota didn't really pick up a lot yet this year, and I know Goligoski's in the lineup. I know there's others too, but I'm interested with Goudreau. That's my pick, is Goudreau. Again, in the comment section, let me know yours. Winnipeg. The funny thing is when people will say, well, your list is wrong, when it's an opinion list. Like, here are the guys I'm interested in seeing. No, you picked the wrong guy from it. Why? It's the guy I'm interested. So from Winnipeg, Nate Schmidt. I liked Nate when he was in Washington. I liked Nate in Vegas. It wasn't a great fit in Vancouver. Now he gets a chance to bounce back with Winnipeg. After initially reportedly not wanting to go to Winnipeg, he was talked into it by Jets brass, and now we'll see how things fit for him. So there were a couple I could have picked from Winnipeg. I'm going with Nate Schmidt. But again, Winnipeg will be interesting to watch anyways, because the blue line was definitely an issue for them last season, and they've gone out of their way to try to fix it. We'll see how it goes. And Schmidt could be a huge part of why it works or why it doesn't. So keep an eye on him. Dallas. With Dallas, another defenseman. You know how much I wanted to write Hockenpah? But I'm writing Ryan Suter. Suter, according to some on the internet, is already washed up. I don't know why anybody give him a contract. Or it's too much term for Dallas. Dallas isn't worried about the term. If they have to trade him in a couple years, they trade him in a couple years. They are worried about the here and now, bouncing back, getting back into contention, because a lot of their core guys are either over 30 or, maybe approaching retirement, with guys like Pavelski, Ben, and others. Radulov comes up. So Suter and his ability to fill in, play top 4 minutes. I don't think he'll be asked to play as much as he did in Minnesota, but he's a key guy for them. And so it'll be interesting to see how he fits in after a very successful run with Minnesota, just a contract that was cumbersome. And that's, Minnesota buys it out. And I still do not understand those buyouts. I think years down the road, we'll still be trying to figure out those buyouts. Maybe with a corkboard and some string. Anyways, Arizona. So we'll stop off with Arizona. And people are going to think I'm being sarcastic with Arizona's pick. But I'm going to explain this. There were a number of guys I could have picked for Arizona. I'm going to explain this. Louis Eriksson may not play for Arizona. He may end up being in watching from the press box. he may end up being the 13th forward that doesn't get to play very often. But before Louis Eriksson signed that contract in Vancouver, he was a good NHL player. It was a bad contract from the beginning. The mix of Louis Eriksson and the Vancouver Canucks was toxic from day one. In the 80s, they would have traded him. Pre-salary cap, even with that contract, somebody would have taken it. A New York Rangers, Detroit Red Wings, Toronto Maple Leafs, somebody would have looked at that and said he had a good year last year for Boston. Maybe he can bounce back. Yeah, we'll take it. The contract kind of sucks, but we can just buy it out if we don't like it later. And remember, there was no salary cap at that point, so wouldn't have been a big deal. That contract, I think, has been kind of a problem. Getting out of Vancouver, getting away from that pressure, could absolutely free up Eriksson. I don't expect a lot from him, but could he score 15 goals in a year? Yeah, I still think that amount of talent is there. Yeah, it may not work out, and Arizona has a lot of other players that are cast-offs because of their contract from other organizations. Let's see how Eriksson works. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the third line on opening night for Arizona, and I would not be entirely surprised if he gives them something that's positive along the way. It is the last year of the contract, so for all those contracts that left Vancouver, all of those guys are in contract years. It's not outside the realm of possibility that in contract years, one, maybe two of them end up having pretty darn good years. Roussel could be a good pickup too, but I'll be interested to see how Louis does. Yeah, maybe he's done. Maybe it's finished. Maybe not. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Which player in New Jersey this year are you most interested to watch? Or which player in New Jersey you're most interested to watch? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.